Well, we're joined now by His Excellency Diri, Governor of Bayelsa State, to shed some light on some of those resolutions agreed on in the Southern Governors Meeting. Good morning, Your Excellency. Thank you for joining us today on the program.
Chamberlain, good morning.
All right, let's start off with that, almost that last bit, which is where we left off with the previous conversation about the rejection of the non-transmission of votes electronically. So do the governors have it on good authority that that is what the Assembly is planning to pass in the Electoral Amendment Act?
Well, for us, we want a transparent system. We want a system that when results are so transmuted, it will be very acceptable. So whether it was a rumor, whether it was part of what the National Assembly has agreed on, we only wanted to set our record straight and then tell Nigerians what we as governors of Southern Nigeria want in the Electoral Amendment Bill.
So does that then, can we assume that the governors have in turn, briefed or spoken with their representatives in the National Assembly to tow the same path?
Oh, sure, yes. We are on the same page with our representatives across Southern Nigeria. And in fact, indeed, we have resolved to have very formal meetings with our representatives across Southern Nigeria.
A part of that document has been circulating concerns spending, election spending, and breaks it down for presidential election, governorship election, which concerns you as well. Did you see any need to intervene in that as well?
Sure. I think that almost everybody is not happy with the huge expenditure during elections. And we are just looking at the formal bit of it. Nobody is looking at the informal expenditures that are being carried out by those who are contesting elections. And what we see is that money has a very big role to play in elections. And if we need to reduce the influence of money in our electoral processes, I think that beyond looking at the formal financial involvements, we also have to look at the informal side. Just like the honorable member was saying, how do you even evaluate the monies that have been expended by those who are contesting elections to delegates, to voters and all that behind the scene? So it is actually a food for thought, and it's worrisome. And we all as Nigerians need to look at that. As governors, we are very worried about it too.
Do you see a possibility, Your Excellency, that we can nip that in the bud such that money doesn't play the kind of role it plays now? You've talked about formal spending and informal spending. The challenge then would be, how do we monitor it? You can't even coin it in law, can you?
Well, our problem has not been much of laws, but implementation. It's not the lack of laws per se, but the implementation of it and the sincerity and the honesty and the commitment by those of us who have the powers of implementation. And again, it is both ways. Those who are implementing it and then those of us who are voters. Because if we also are committed to making the electoral process free of fraud, even as voters, we need to now begin to sing a new song that getting money during elections will actually not bring the kind of democracy that we all are anticipating to have in Nigeria, a democracy that will grow from strength to strength. So for me, at this stage. It is difficult to nip in the bud, but it's a welcome development, the amendment of the electoral bill. If we go into full-scale electronic voting, we have the registers that are electronic. We have the process of voting, which is voting itself, will now be by electronic. And then the transmitting of the results will also be in the same process. That will go a long way to also check the influence of money in the process.
Well, Your Excellency, I mean, when it comes to, I mean, you talked about, the fact that the responsibility is also on the voter. But at a time when some people say poverty has been weaponized against the people, so to speak, it will be really difficult to say that people shouldn't collect the money. But hopefully that is what the game plan is. But the challenge here is enforcement of that provision of the law. How do you, is it possible to enforce the law such that people do not incentivize people with money to vote for them?
Again, the enforcement is both ways. It's both ways. When you are in that process, the agencies, INEC, the security agencies, will have to lead by example. If they lead by example and monies do not play so much role in their discharge of their own duties, it will also rub off on the electorates. It will rub off on the politicians. Because if an INEC official, if a security agency refuses a politician with all the influences of money, that will rub off on the electorate. And so it is something that both the institutions charged with the processes, the politicians themselves, and the people have to be on one page. It is not something that will come up maybe just from top to down. It has to go from bottom to the top and from the top to the down.
Speaking about the petroleum industry bill, yes, the Southern governors rejected that proposed 30% share of profit for the exploration of oil and gas in the basins. They also rejected the 3% to host communities, wanting 5%. But for some of those positions on the PIB, why did the governors have to wait until this point? Because even many say 3 or even 5% is way too small.
Yeah, that's very correct. The governors didn't wait until now. You recall that our first meeting as Southern governors was in Asaba, and that's about a month ago. And before then, individually, and each state has held a position. And if you look at those positions, they are almost common within the Southern governors. Speaking on behalf of my state, Bayelsa, we held a position, and that was a position that we went to defend even during the public hearings by the National Assembly. And our position was very clear. Clearly, we came against the 30% for exploration of oil in the frontier states or basins. We cannot imagine how you are proposing, as at that time, even 2.5% for the communities. And then you want to go and explore oil with the profit, with the proceeds from these oil-producing communities for 30%. Is unthinkable, and that is total injustice. And so for us in Bayelsa and almost all the other oil producing states, we went to National Assembly and stated our position that the least we can stand for was 10%. And we rejected that 30% proposal. And by the way, let me state this very clearly. No oil company develops or explores oil from proceeds or profits from an NNPC. We have seen major international oil companies, the IOCs, the Nigerian Najib Oil Company, Shell Oil Company. None of them have explored oil from proceeds of other people's oil. And so we see this again as another fraud. We see this again as another injustice meted out to the oil producing communities, just as we have seen the land use. So that's one. And then we also looked at the definition of oil producing states. Again, some people say that has been misinterpreted, but you cannot have everywhere that pipeline goes through to be now defined as an oil producing community. An oil producing community couldn't have been where pipes are laid. And that is the common understanding that Nigerians are beginning to have about the definition of oil producing communities, which again is totally unacceptable to us, particularly those of us whose states are the oil producing states.
All right, Excellency, we'll go to break, but we'll be back in about 3 minutes, so please stay with us. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, Your Excellency, you were a member of the Senate. You even headed that committee, oil and gas. So many thought that there must have been some negotiations, some lobbying concerning this PIB way before now. Could you give us some of the backstory? What could the undercurrents have been? How come that it appeared as though all of those, parley didn't yield the required results?
Well, you can see how long this has been in the, and these were some of why it has been in the coup. One as the other. The time we meet was at the national. These were the burning issues. We are, most of our colleagues, other Nigeria, who do not see reasons why we are saying what we believe in. PIB has taken this. I actually want to the current assembly for tackling this head. Some of why the PIB are cooked for these number of years. The issues that I've just highlighted, the issues of the deficit and oil producing, and it's a time bomb if we do not address the issue of who and oil producing. It will further lead to more confrontations and agreements within the polity.
Your Excellency, it is actually quite interesting when we hear stuff like this that you have said. But if things have gotten to this point, such that the yearnings of the people would seemingly be unmet, what then do you think the options are for the people? Largely, one could see, the efforts, at least efforts of some members of the National Assembly, they made, especially those from the Niger Delta, trying to push as much as they could for the interests of their people. So if the interests of the Niger Delta people are not being met as desired, the host communities in particular, are not being met, what do you think the options are?
Yeah, for me and then for us in Bielsa, we have agreed that we will actually engage in dialogue. We want to engage in dialogue and bring to the fore the issues and why people who do not understand our environment and the environmental degradation, and of course the effects on our economy, the effects on our psyche, and even on our social relationships. We need to bring them to the fore for everybody to appreciate, so that when we come with these arguments, those who are not from the Niger Delta will understand why we are bringing up such arguments. I like to recall here, whilst we were in the 8th Assembly in the House of Representatives, I had a colleague from northern Nigeria, precisely from Niger State, who was chairman of a committee, and we went on oversight to somewhere in Delta State. And by the time we returned, my colleague called me and said, look, I now understand your position, why the position you take on the floor of the House. But henceforth, I will not oppose your presentation on the floor of the House. And I think most of it is out of the ignorance of those who are not in the terrain of the Niger Delta. If you go to the Niger Delta now, we're talking about Ogoni cleanup, but the whole of the Niger Delta terrain needs cleanup. If you go to the Niger Delta now, the livelihood of the people is totally finished. And we must consciously give back to these people. And so, for me, the way forward is dialogue, understanding and appreciation of the issues, the challenges of the people of these oil-producing communities.
Excellency, there are those who also ask the question around why allocate 30% of profits of the NNPC that you mentioned earlier for new frontiers when the previous spendings on these frontier business have not been probed. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mentioned it earlier, and our take is that is injustice. Our take is that these are potential areas of conflicts, because I believe that for those of us who are advocating for dialogue, there are also those who had believed and thought that these people actually do not want us to be in Nigeria. Otherwise, I mean, it's unimaginable that you are giving 5%, which is even from the House of Reps, from the Senate is 3%, to those whose communities have been affected, whose means of livelihood has been affected, and going further, oil exploration and oil exploitation is continuing in those communities. And here you are giving 30% to frontier states. And before now, like you rightly mentioned, huge sums of money have been allocated for that purpose. And no oil has been found. In fact, my prayer is that oil should be found in those frontiers, in those basins, so that maybe this expropriation will stop. Because maybe if we find, for instance, oil in Chad Basin, certainly those who are from the Chad Basin will also now become oil-producing communities and will also benefit from the derivation. And let us see if they will agree at that point that those whose soil from which oil is found should be given 13%, and 87% should be surrendered to the rest of the country.
Well, so many issues on that area, but let's see if it will dovetail into the other. The resolution, part of the resolutions also indicated that by September 1, there was going to be a promulgation of anti-open grazing law in the region. Do you think there's been enough, perhaps consultation, dialogue with other regions in the country to ensure or see reason why this has got to be so, such that there'll be that understanding and not that it will rub off in the wrong way?
Yeah, thank you, Chamberlain. First, I like to state here that the issue of grazing is a commercial, private activity, just like any other commercial, private venture. I don't see why we should need somebody else's opinion to regulate the movement of cattle, which is purely a private activity. For us as a state and for us as a region, we are also having the wherewithal, we have the authority to protect our citizens and their businesses. And by the Nigerian Constitution, we have been so vested with these powers of lawmaking. That's why in every state you have a state house of assembly, and which is to regulate. Because where one man's right stops, another person's right begins. And for us in Bayelsa, our anti-grazing law was signed on the 11th of March 2021. And so from the date that I appended my signature and assented to that bill, in Bayelsa, it has already come into effect. And we have arrested some of them who breached the law. And they have paid the penalties. And so for us in Bayelsa, it is not from September. Ours have started far back as 11th of March 2021. And so the point here is that we do not need any other person's input in making of our laws. We went through the process of lawmaking. If anybody who is interested in making an input, he should have gone there during the public hearing and then make his own inputs. And so the issue of consulting others in making laws just reduces our democracy and what the Constitution actually stands for.
You know, I mean, the governors had to come together to say this in some sense. I mean, they say there's strength in numbers. And one wonders, have you had pushback from any quarters such that the governors now had to come together and say, fine, if you can withstand maybe one or two of us, certainly not all of us. Has there been a lot of pushback, especially for your state? I mean, you said you've promulgated that law. Has there been any sort of pushback such that there was a need now for all the governors in the southern region to come together and say, this is what we want?
You know, we in our meetings, we discuss common issues and common challenges. This was also one of those common challenges. And when it was even brought to the floor of our meetings, already states like Bayelsa, I think Ondo, Oyo, and few of us have already taken, proactive steps on the issue before. So when it was brought to the floor of our meeting, the response from every other governor was the same. And that's why it was imperative at that point that we take a common position on it.
Well, I didn't actually mean that they should seek the permission of others before coming up with a position on the open grazing. I was trying to, because I know politicians use the term lobbying, consultation and the likes before certain things are done. Because, I mean, we've heard them say several times that those people who are actually herding those cows don't really own them, that they're usually those who send them. So it is from that context, especially when we also remember that the governor of Kano State always has said, look, this is not sustainable. We need to ensure that this stops. So that was the perspective. One thought that if you perhaps they let them see reason why this should not be, but the law will remain. So that's what I meant by that.
Oh, thank you. I understand you clearly now. But just as you said, even in the north, from where these elders, come to the southern part of the country, there are a lot of voices against open grazing. It is no more fashionable. It is not practicable. And across the world, you don't hear that again. For me, that's another sign, another symptom of underdevelopment in any part of the world. And so we need to move away. We need to move away from open grazing, to ranching. And I'm happy that most of my colleagues, even in the north, not most, some of them are advocating for ranching. And that's the solution to this problem. I don't think that in this century that people should be moving, even those of them who are moving. There are people who do not have the opportunity. I don't think that those who own the cattle will ask their own children to move from northern Nigeria by foot to southern Nigeria. I don't believe so. Their children will be studying in schools. Even if they are to rear cattle, it has to be the most modern techniques and technology of rearing cattle. And that's what we are all advocating. And so these people who are moving, some say they are not even Nigerians. Some say they are coming in from other countries. We need to stop it.
Well, the forum also spoke about the presidency coming from the South. But we know that is not how these things work. It's going to take much more than that pronouncement. So is it that the Southern governors are also going to do the work? Because, certain people will say, if you take that position, does that then mean that you wouldn't want to see anyone from any other region vie for that position other than people from the South?
Not necessarily, Chamberlain, not necessarily. Well, this is where your initial thoughts have come in, so to speak. At this point, what we need to do is lobbying. We have taken a position, and that position is a political position. So you don't need to impose it on people. You have to now talk to people. You have to lobby them and see reasons with you why, our position will be beneficial to the country. It will be beneficial for the smooth, power transfer from one region to the other. The North has what it takes, to produce a president, and ditto the South. The South has what it takes to produce a president. And for us to live harmoniously, with respect for each other, and believe that power actually comes from God. But when we have this relationship and this understanding that for 8 years, for 2 terms, as our constitution has allowed, one particular region will be there, and then the next time we transfer to the other region. And do not forget the brief history from former President Obasanjo. When he was done with his 2 terms, he left the scene and brought in Yaradua. And Yaradua was there. The unfortunate incident of death happened, and that brought in the child of necessity, which led to our leader and my brother, the former president, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, assuming office. And after the 4 years, the North now moved, that the power was actually theirs and it must return to them. I should return to them. And finally, they got it. And now we are seeing the last term of President Buhari. And it is only usual, only normal and acceptable to us from the South that this will be reciprocated by our brothers from the North. And that's why we took that decision yesterday to say that in 2023, the president should actually come from the South.
The clock is ticking. It's less than 2 years to the 2023 elections. I mean, one would also imply that that rotation was implied, really, because you just referenced what happened after former President Obasanjo ended his tenure, how we brought in former President Yaradua, and then up till this point. So one would think it was some sort of gentleman agreement. Why was there a need for the governors to come out with such strong statement? Had you been seeing maybe signs, symptoms, things were going the other way, and you thought, wait a minute, we need to steer this back on the course we want? Why was there a need to come up with that position in the first place?
Well, you'll agree with me that whatever we have done, it's not constitutionally backed up. It is not constitutional that the presidents have to rotate between the North and the South. It is actually more of a gentleman's agreement, and to enhance peaceful coexistence and for us to have a democracy that all the groups, all the ethnic nationalities, and all the regions will also key in and buy in. And so, I don't know, you described it as a very strong statement, but for us, we feel and we believe that this will only enhance peaceful coexistence and being your brother's keeper.
Well, Excellency, it's just a year and some months ever since you got into office, and already you know how it is in this country. People want politicians, elected officials to hit the ground running, as you people usually say. And now they say that in your state that work is slow, the shadow of your predecessor looms large on your administration. They just want a lot of things to change.
Well, I don't know who the they are. I don't know who the they are.
They are your constituency. They're Bayelsans as well.
No, that's not true of Bayelsans. Bayelsans are very happy. Bayelsans know that we are doing well. And Bayelsans have been pouring praises and encomiums on us. But to answer that question, firstly, you know, I came in as governor in the month of COVID-19, which was February. And from then on, well, I would rather say we lost about a year to COVID-19, and a lot of distractions by way of legal battles. But immediately COVID-19 ended and we hit the ground running. We have done so much in the state, that if you, Chamberlain, I would like to invite you to come over to Bayelsa and see things for yourself, so that you will not be depending on they say, but you will actually see and say. I don't like singing my praises. I like others to actually look at and tell me where we have done wrong and where we have done right. But I think that we have done so much, and so much is going on in Bayelsa State.
All right, well, we'd like to hear from Bayelsans as well on your promise. But so is it that they don't have a point when they say that, well, yes, your predecessor played a role in your assumption of office, but when they say that he's pulling too much strings, isn't that a point that they make?
That's what I'm saying. I don't want you to be the they say Riekura. I want you to go there and see things for yourself. It's a state that politics has divided to factions, you know, and there was so much of bitterness and hatred. And as I speak with you, part of what I came with as an agenda was to ensure that we reconcile. In fact, I came with a ministry of reconciliation. If you go back to my statements on the day of my inauguration, you will see what I mean. And I stood by it, and I've been practicing that. Before now, you see people who do not belong to the same political parties. They can't even eat together. Some of them don't even greet. But all that is changing. And in terms of infrastructure, we are doing so much in infrastructure. We are carrying on with so much of projects, senatorial road projects and urban renewal projects within Yenagua. And we have even started a lot of human capital development. We are not at the peak yet, but very soon we'll get to the peak of human capital development.
In fact, that's the point where, pardon me to jump in. I mean, yes, we always like to see a harmonious working environment and relationship, government really being a continuum. One government leaves, another comes in and continues in that same project from the center to the subnationals. That is always what people want to see. So could you then tell us, or tell our Bayelsans who are equally listening, what is your target? What should they look forward to in terms of either creating the environment for employment, at least in the next, 1 year, 2 years, months? What should they look forward to?
Well, a lot of politicians make promises, and sometimes those promises may not be kept. For me, I want to first of all see a peaceful Bayelsa state, a peaceful state. And you will agree with me that Bayelsa, in current day, relatively in Nigeria, is one of the most peaceful states. And I want to see a Bayelsa that will key in to our agenda of prosperity. And Bayelsans have started keying in to the prosperity agenda. And so we are bringing in prosperity, prosperity in spirit, in soul, prosperity in material wealth. And so for us as a government, we would like to, at this point, harness the resources of the state, the resources both human and material, to ensure that our agenda of prosperity is carried on to the end. I'm very sure that by next year, when we will be 2 years, some of you will come on board to see exactly what I mean. Timelines, yes, very good, but sometimes are not feasible because nobody has control of what tomorrow is bringing for us. Just as we didn't know about COVID-19 last year, and COVID-19 came in, our economy went down, downturn in the economy, and everything was affected. So for me, I believe that by next year, when we will hit 2 years, we will showcase what we have done for our state.
All right, then, Your Excellency Diri, Governor of Bayelsa State, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Chamberlain, and thank you, viewers.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some feedback coming through from people. Which do we have first? Do we? No way. We usually do. We should.
Well,
shouldn't we?
Clearly do. Yeah. A lot of them, by the way.
Yeah, let me just believe that. I mean, we'll see one or two right on the screen right away.
Believe that?
Yes, I mean, we have to believe. That's faith. I mean, you just heard the governor.
Okay, not politician.
I think Lagunju is first with this
there
one.
You go. Nice.
And it's on Electoral Act. Olagunju Oladele says, several mechanisms for improving democracy have been suggested, most of which involve making it even more transparent. Everyone understands that democracy is not perfect, even in most developed nations. However, the electoral laws should help protect the process. We have seen courts overturn some results, political malpractices, and he says he's yet to see anyone being prosecuted for election fraud. I recall the chairman of the INEC speaking regarding that. He referenced the recent conviction that they had. Ends by saying, are there laws to prosecute political parties and players for malpractice? Big question there.
And, you know, if you look at those amendments, which they say was strange, about 20 of those provisions, you see these concerns that Nigerians are raising are huge there. They get the impression from that context of the whole of that 20, that some people just want to go somewhere and write certain results without those safety nets, those checks and balances, wherein power, they say, lies with the people. In a democracy, it does lie. People should lie, it should remain there. So that's it. Look at this next one. Anyway.
Well, yes, that's Oseni Job, who is saying the truth on the same matter. The truth remains that what is worth doing at all is worth doing well. We need to take the bull by the horn to just hit the hammer on the nail. Let this take effect immediately. That's talking about transfer of elections electronically. However, but please, let's save ourselves from unnecessary election violence as a result of rigging.
What about Demola Lalade? Do we have that? Is this? All right, there you go. He says the Electoral Act Amendment Bill that will change the electoral process of the country seems to be compromised again. The leadership of the National Assembly must ensure the Electoral Amendment Bill is properly effected and must represent the wishes of Nigerians. And then Kenneth comes through.
We got there. Comrade Diri talking about Southern Governor's Resolution, says the Southern Governor's Resolution is a welcome development. But again, Southern President is really not what we need as a nation, but qualified individuals in the affairs of governance. Until our electioneering process is more transparent, in order for citizens of this nation to elect their choice of leaders into political office, tribe or region in power will not change anything. Therefore, it's time we do away with primordial sentiments as we position ourselves to elect credible leaders with mental capacity, he adds. Don't know why that was important. A number of them, there's Kenneth Anelechuku, famous Timile. I think we can see a number. I don't know if we still have time. Do we? Maybe we don't. Well, thank you so much for sending in your mails. Yes, you can see that from Kenneth Alechuku. Hopefully, I'm always hoping against hope, even though my hope is yet to materialize, that we'll be able to take some more mails one day, someday. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Mao Yusuf.
I hope so too as well. I'm Kayode Kikere.
When you talk about hope, one of the comments actually mentioned Hope 93. Amaya Makinde, have a wonderful day.
What can we do without hope or hoping in life?
Maybe someone's name.
I'm trying better than yourself. We'll see you next time.